They say the river remembers everything. Every scream that went unheard. Every glance that vanished into the mist. But there are places where even the river stays silent, because in its shadow lies something best left undisturbed. My name is Harry. And this story, this is one of those that never stays closed in a case file. It clings to you, even when you think it's all behind you. It was 5:43 a.m. The phone call jolted me awake. I don't wake up from calls, unless it's something serious. The voice on the other end was young, trembling, like a wire strung tight in the cold. "Detective, it's Jimmy. I'm at the river, that old cabin. I ducked in to get out of the rain, and I found. You need to come." The words were broken, but the tone was clear. Something had happened. I didn't ask questions. Just threw on my coat, grabbed my notebook, and left. Officially, I was retired. But some cases don't wait for red tape. The sky hung heavy and gray, pressing low over the city like something was about to fall. The rain had just stopped, but the fog still clung to the ground, unwilling to release the night. I started up the old car and headed toward the river. The road out there isn't for tourists, narrow, winding, with turns hidden behind trees. The forest around it felt like an old novel, dark, silent, full of implications. And then, the first obstacle. Halfway there, right before the turn that opens to the river's edge, a tree blocked the road. Huge, uprooted, its roots looked like torn veins. There'd been a storm yesterday. A hell of one. And now, this barrier. I stopped. The engine hissed, like even it didn't want to go. I got out, walked around the tree, tried to move it, pointless. Even two men wouldn't manage. But I knew a way around, an old forest path we used back in the 80s, when my partner and I went fishing. I backed up, turned off the main road, and eased into the woods. The tires slipped, branches scraped the windows, but with each yard, I was getting closer. To the cabin. To the river. To the truth. When I finally reached the familiar bank, the fog was even thicker. Silence. Complete. Even the birds were quiet. Jimmy stood by a tree, pale as chalk. In his hands, a thermos, trembling along with him. "She's inside," he whispered. I nodded. And walked. The cabin stood just as it always had, old, with a sagging roof and boarded windows that hadn't seen light in years. I remembered it from older cases. It had never felt just abandoned, but left behind for a reason. The door creaked open with a sound that ran down my spine. Inside, dim light. The smell of damp, old wood, dust, and something else. Something you couldn't quite place. And then I saw her. In the middle of the room, on the wooden floor, a woman lay. Not broken. Not wounded. Just, still. Her eyes open, staring upward, through the ceiling, as if seeing something we couldn't. No signs of struggle. No dirt. No blood. Everything, clean. Too clean. I stepped closer. On her wrist, a bracelet. Old. Hand-carved with a triangle symbol. You don't buy something like that. It's passed down. Or found, in strange places. Next to her, a notebook. Most pages soaked, the ink bleeding like memories that couldn't be pieced back together. But one scrap was dry. And on it, the words. He won't let go. He's still here. I froze. I'd heard that line before. 10 years ago. Another case. And guess where it turned up? This very cabin. Different woman. Different story. Same message. That's no coincidence. That's a pattern. I inhaled. The air in the cabin had turned colder, even though daylight was breaking outside. I stepped out. Jimmy hadn't moved. His eyes begged for answers. "Do you know what this is?" he asked softly. I looked at the river. The water flowed, indifferent. It had seen everything. But it stayed silent. As always. I returned to the cabin later that same day. The place was already surrounded, unofficially. I'd called a few old friends from the department, and they, the ones who still trusted me, showed up quietly. No questions, no cameras, no paperwork. We didn't want to make noise. Not yet. The woman's body had already been sent for examination, but the air still carried that same scent, something between decay and metal. I stepped into the cabin again, this time alone, and started inspecting it not as a crime scene, but as a stage. Because that's what it felt like, a performance, set for a single viewer. Me. In the corner, behind an old armchair, I found another detail. A watch. An old pocket watch, with a chain already turned green from age. The face had stopped. Time, 3:17. And the strangest part? The hands hadn't just stopped, they were melted. As if from intense heat. But nothing around had burned. I pulled on gloves and picked it up. On the back, an engraving. Small, almost invisible. V.S. 1963. Quat la tête, Manet. Latin. I'm no linguist, but I remembered the meaning: what is hidden, remains. Beautiful. Too beautiful for a random victim. Then I heard a sound. Not the floor creaking. Not the wind. This was something else, soft splashing. Water. Movement. I stepped outside. The river was quiet. But nearby, in the reeds, something shifted. I followed the path down to the water's edge. And there I saw it, a boat. Small, old, tied to a wooden stake barely holding on. The boat was rust-stained, the paint peeling. But there was something else, rubber boots. Standing upright, as if someone had just taken them off. Clean. And wet inside. I looked around. No one. I grabbed a flashlight and shone it into the boat. Nothing unusual. Except, one more thing. A newspaper clipping. Pinned under the bench. An old headline. Local woman vanishes near river. 2015. Only note left behind, he won't let go. It hit me like a wave. That was the headline. That case. And if the clipping was here, someone's watching. Someone wants me to know. I returned to the cabin. Past the dusty shelves, but one thing stopped me. Hanging from a nail, another bracelet. Identical to the woman's. With a triangle. And now I understood, this wasn't a random killing. This was a sequence. Someone is leaving signs for me. Someone wants me to unravel this. Or, wants me to go deeper. The next day, I returned alone. At dawn. Took the boat and rowed along the river. The fog still clung like a shroud. Silent, heavy. And just when I thought about turning back, I saw another cabin. Small, hidden in the trees. Not on any map. Unknown even to the locals. I moored. Put on the same boots, turns out they were my size, imagine that, and walked to the door. It was closed. But not locked, latched from the inside. Which meant someone had been there. Or still was. I knocked. 3 times. Silence. Then, a sound. Slow footsteps. And a voice. A woman's. Did you find his watch? I didn't answer right away. Just pulled it from my pocket. Held it up. That means you're next, she said. The door didn't open. But from inside, a piece of paper slid out. On it, a map of the river. With an X marked just downstream. I picked it up. And I knew, the game had just begun. I was sitting in the boat, holding a map. The river, drawn in black ink, looked simple, but where the X was marked, there was weight. Something was there. And I needed to find out what, before it disappeared. I glanced at my watch. 7:52 a.m. That's when it hit me, I was late. Not just for a meeting. For something much bigger. Someone had left me a clue, left the map, and that someone wasn't going to wait. I gripped the oars. The river was silent, but something in the air had shifted. The birds were gone. The water felt heavier, like syrup. The boat drifted slowly, inching toward the X, which could be an answer, or a trap. Then I saw it. A small island in the middle of the river. You wouldn't find it on any map. A fallen tree, a pile of stones, thick undergrowth. And among it all, something glinted. Not just metal. Gold. I moored the boat, stepped onto the land, and moved closer. There, beneath the branches, lay an old metal box. Covered in moss, forgotten by time. I opened it. Inside, old documents, photos, letters. But most important, a tape. A cassette. Labeled, V.S. Personal. Do not open without him. I stood there, holding it, and suddenly I knew, I'd seen this before. This wasn't just evidence. It was a confession. The story no one wanted to hear. And maybe, the one that started it all. I took one last look at the river, and turned back. I got to the car around noon. It was right where I'd left it, but the air was different now. As if someone had been here while I was gone. The door, slightly ajar. Even though I knew I'd shut it. I opened the trunk slowly, and saw another box. Not mine. It was tied with string. I opened it. Inside, the same triangle bracelets. 5 of them. Each with a tiny tag, stamped with a year, 1963. 1982, 1991. 2015, 2025. I exhaled. The last year, this year. These weren't just objects. This was a timeline. A pattern. And the last bracelet was mine. My phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. You're closer than you think. But not all that glitters is gold. I tossed the box into the passenger seat, started the engine, and headed toward the city. On the way, I flipped through the island documents. Photos. Notes. One face kept appearing, a man with a watch, just like the one I'd found in the cabin. Always in the background, the river. And always next to him, a woman with the same look she had. The last one. This wasn't a string of coincidences. It was a cult. A ritual. And all roads led to one man. Victor S. V.S., a name that had popped up in several old cases, back from my first year on the force. A former professor, expert in symbolism, who vanished in the 90s after his wife's mysterious death. Back then, they never found him. Now I knew why. He hadn't disappeared. He'd been waiting. I returned to the cabin by evening. The sunset turned the river gold, fitting, considering gold had become the symbol of this game. Shiny, alluring, and false. The door was ajar again. And this time, I wasn't alone. Inside sat a man. Old, thin-faced, with eyes that had seen too much. On his wrist, the same watch. "You found everything you needed?" he asked, without turning. I placed the cassette on the table. "You're V.S. I'm just a shadow," he said. "But a shadow you've been chasing." He turned to face me. He looked peaceful. Too peaceful. "Why?" I asked. "Why the women? Why this game?" He smiled. Not with malice. With sorrow. They weren't victims. They were chosen. They knew more than they should have. And the river always takes back what's its own. I stared at him. I wanted to scream. But it was too late. You're too late, Harry, he said, pointing to the window. And there, on the river, another boat drifted by. Empty. Except, for a tape. A different one. For whoever comes next. I stepped outside. The fog was beginning to rise off the water. The car was right where I left it. But when I sat behind the wheel, I saw something else on the seat. The final bracelet. And on it, my initials, H.R.